All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renu, as introduced by Kelvin. Let me give you a little introduction about my background. I'm currently the services sales manager for emerging country, and attached to Keysight. I've been with the organization for 14 years, and 6 years prior, I was attached to a contract manufacturing company. My role has definitely changed quite a number of times within Keysight. I started off in technical marketing, then moved to to program management, marketing program management, business development, and right now in sales. Now, job aside, I've been actively involved in Keysight branding initiatives and also corporate emceeing corporate events. And apart from that, as my passion, I do a lot of knowledge sharing, and I'm also an active member of Toastmasters International. Now, why have I decided to do this sharing? In my job, I do a lot of presentation, and right from my marketing days to today. And in sales, I used to visit customers like every month, 2 weeks in a month. And when I don't visit customer, I engage them virtually, right? It's either through video calls or by emails. And things changed when the lockdown happened. Everything changed. I can no longer visit my customers. And almost overnight, everything has turned to 100% virtual. And one thing in that journey that I learned is that I quickly needed to adapt. I quickly needed to adapt how to learn new things and how to continue to have my customer engagement. And that is how I learned up and brushed up my virtual presentation skills. And that it has been very helpful to me because today I engage on virtual presentation almost every other day, not just for a job as well as other events, including my Toastmasters. So what I would like to share with you today is my learning throughout this almost 9-10 months, and I'm hoping that this will help you to pick up the skills a lot faster and create and deliver an effective presentation. Right now, before I start this sharing session, here's a little introduction about Keysight, though we have watched a bit on the video. Now, though the name Keysight might be new to some of you, the company has been around for over 80 years. It was found on electronic measurement innovation in 1939 as Hewlett-Packard by Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard. It later spun off from HP and became Agilent, the world's premier measurement company. Later, its electronic measurement business spun off and became Keysight on November 1st, 2014. Today, Keysight is world's largest test and measurement company. Our headquarters is in Santa Rosa, California, US. And as a global company, we are located in over 150 locations around the world. Closer to home, we are in Malaysia for 48 years now, since 1972. We are located in Bayan Lepas, Penang, with over 2,500 employees. It's quite a huge facility. Over the years, Keysight has received numerous industry recognition, including Employee of the Choice Award, Human Resources Minister Award, Best Employer in Malaysia, and Best Employer for Engaging Women in Workforce, and many more. And that's the brief introduction about Keysight, and let's dive into our topic today, effective presentation. Okay, and here I'll be sharing with you how can you create and deliver an effective presentation. So are you ready? I hope you are. Now, as I'm presenting, there's a Q&A box. Do enter your question as it comes up in your mind, and I'll take up the question at the end of the session, all right? So let's look at the introduction a little bit. We all have been talking about virtual presentation quite a bit. But virtual presentation, if you think about it, it isn't new. It has been around for quite a while. It's just that it has been more popular and has been used increasingly ever since the pandemic has started, because that became almost the only option that we have. And taking Zoom, for example, before the pandemic, there was about 10 million users of Zoom, and it increased to 200 million by April, and by Late April, it became 300 million, and now a lot more. And that's how popular virtual engagement has become. And let's look at what do we categorize under virtual events. Interviews, for example. But again, this isn't new. I remember my first virtual interview was almost 6 years ago, where we used to do it in telepresence room. And most company, including Keysight, has started this many years before. Second one, meetings. Almost all meetings are on virtual right now, learning and teaching, as well as conference. But for some things like this, especially conference, if you take as an example, this has turned to become a blessing because most of the time it'll be done in one location or in one country and everyone has to travel over there. And it depends on whether you have the budget for it or someone could sponsor you. Recently, I attended the Society of Women's Engineers conference, which was held in US, but this time it was 100% virtual. And because of that, there were more participants were given the opportunity to attend the conference and benefit from it. Now, so coming to think of it, virtual presentation is the new norm, and it's probably here to stay for long. Even far after the pandemic is over, looking at how much the support system and people has become comfortable with it, and we realize that we could actually benefit from it, virtual presentation is here to stay. In fact, moving forward, what we could experience could be a hybrid where some people will be meeting face to face, while others are still given the opportunity to engage in virtual presentation. So as this is becoming more and more important, it becomes crucial for us to learn the skill and master it as soon as possible so that we too could present in a very effective manner and stand out, especially if you're attending a very important meeting or even an interview. How do you stand out compared to any other candidates? And these are the things are important for us to learn. All right. Now, what are the things that we'll be covering? First thing is, what has really changed between the face-to-face meeting and virtual presentation? And then we'll be looking at how to create engagement online, then how to deliver virtual presentation effectively. We will also cover the etiquette of virtual meetings. And finally, we'll do a wrap up. All right. Now, what has really changed? Okay, now, I've been talking quite a bit. Now, here's a question for you. So let's just take about 30 seconds to answer this question. What is the similarity in virtual meetings and face-to-face meeting? Now, there's no right or wrong answer. Just put what do you think are the similarities? Put them in the chat box. Kelvin, are you seeing, because I'm not seeing any response coming in. Okay, yeah, that's coming in. Can talk it. All right, okay. Both needs communication. Yes, correct. Both involves people, correct? Different opinion. Human beings. No difference? Stephen, are you sure? We get to see the speaker. And that is if the video is on. Both needs to dress up, yes. The discussion is the same, can talk face to face. All right, okay, then here's the next question. What's the difference between virtual presentation or virtual meetings and face-to-face meeting? Stephen, I would like to hear from you. Physically separate, without human touch, right? The feel of nervous, that's in face-to-face or virtual? The speaker can't see us, right? That's good for you, but it's not good for the speaker, to be honest. Lost connection between human touch. We are getting all the right words coming in. Yes, bad network. Limited floor. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much for your response. Now, let's look at what is the similarity between these two and what's the difference. If you look at it, there's so much of similarities, as you mentioned just now, between face-to-face meeting and virtual meetings, right? There's still human involved, there's still communication, there's still a message that we want to pass. But what is missing and what is really crucial is the human touch. And that's missing. Just like what someone mentioned just now, is that the speaker can't see you. Yes, and that's probably nice when you're on the other end, but it's not really cool when you're a speaker because I really can't see your response. And that's something that's missing, human touch. So imagine in jobs when you're walking into an interview room. Remember, we used to say the first 5 seconds counts, or you want to make your first impression. And now all that it's going to happen without the human touch. Now, the reason why I wanted to emphasize this is because when we understand what are the similarities, that also give us the comfort knowing that there's a knowledge that we already know that we can always leverage from face-to-face meeting to virtual meeting. At the same time, there are things that we got to learn to make sure that we fill up this gap, to close the gap of the missing human touch. All right. Now we know that what is missing and what is the gap that we got to fill up. Let's look at how do we create engagement online. Now, so remember, if you have any questions, please enter into the chat box, into the question and answer box. Now, first thing first, to create an engagement. Now, in this slide, what I'm going to share with you is really crucial, regardless of it's a face-to-face meeting or virtual meeting. But there's something really important that I want to emphasize. Know your audience. Now, the rule is it's a human nature to engage in any communication or any activities with this question in mind. What is in it for me? Isn't that what you have in your mind when you join this session? What can I learn from this? And that's human nature. So it is the speaker's responsibility to answer that question that the audience have. What is in it for me of the audience? So know your audience. Now, when I say know your audience, that is not just say like, for example, if it's an interview, who's my audience interviewer? It doesn't stop there. You got to know that what is the level of that person. Is he an engineering manager or is he an engineering director? Because what is in it for me of that person, it ties back to his position, because what is important for them, it always different, right? So first and foremost, know your audience, and then understand your own message. You should be able to articulate your message concisely and clarity. And if you're going into a meeting or if you're walking into an interview, and then when someone asks you, what is your message? If you are unable to articulate, then there's a bit of a problem there. So always be very clear yourself about what is the message that you want to pass. The second thing is your content creation. Keep it simple. The slides is supposed to just guide you and not supposed to speak by itself. And keep it interesting. For some of us, if you're attending meeting like 6 meetings in a day, or if it's an interviewer who's meeting 10 people in a day and you have some slides and it's all wordy, it is going to be rather boring. So keep it interesting. If you want to put some graphics that's interesting, put it there. And pay attention to minor details, the font size, color, and things like that. If you have an template like for Keysight, we have our own template. If it's not, you can always be able to Google for templates where the color contrast, a right color contrast is shown to you. Don't use like a blue background with yellow writing, and that's going to be a really an eyesore, right? And when it comes to font, if it's in presentation, keep it to the smallest as font 18, but I usually keep 20 and above. And the second thing is content delivery. Now, the first and foremost is you got to introduce yourself or create credibility. For example, when I'm talking to my customers for the first time, when they have not seen me, I'll introduce myself as who I am, what is my position, and why am I the one who's talking about that particular product or solution. And then that will actually, in a way, engage that interest from the other party as of Why should I listen to this person? And if you notice just now, when I introduced myself, besides what I'm doing as my job, I also told you why am I sharing this. And that is really important because that is in a way kind of connecting to your audience beforehand. Okay. The next one, do not make assumption. Now, this is very common for us to make assumption, especially when it comes to abbreviation. We think everyone understands. So if you're using certain abbreviation or certain word for the first time, if you think or you're not sure whether people know or do not know, just say in full or give a brief explanation about it. Be mindful of your audience. Now, let me give you an example. As I was saying earlier, my customers are in emerging countries, which means that some of them are Thai, Vietnamese, or even have Korean customers in Vietnam, for example. Now, for all of us or most of us, English is not our first language, and we have the different pace in terms of with how we speak and our understanding in terms of language. So it's always good to know who are our audience and what is their level of understanding on a certain topic or even the language so that we control the speed, we control the kind of language we use. In my case, I usually go for a simpler words so that I make sure that my audience or my customers understand what I say. And another practice that I always do is that after one topic is done, I'll pause and ask them, do you have any question? Because if I lose them halfway or at the beginning, I'm going to lose them completely by the end of my presentation. So it's always good to be mindful of who your audience are. And the next thing, do not read from your slides. If you're going to read, then there's no reason of having a speaker, right? And that is also why you should not have, you should keep your slides simple because if you have all the writings there, you're going to read from your slides. And here's another one, the use of pointers and highlighters. Now, I attended one meeting this morning and I saw this happening again. So I've got to emphasize on this. Now, this is a pointer. It is called pointer for a reason. You're supposed to use it to point. But have you seen presenters doing this? This is number one. This is my second point. And the one that they like to do it as this one. Stop playing with that because it's a pointer. So use it only to point, right? It's easy to remember. The second thing, the use of pen or highlighters. Now, unless you have super steady hand, avoid using pen or highlighters. So here's an example. This slide, okay, I'm going to self-praise here. It looks a little bit professional, right? And what will happen when I start using a pen? And let's say I'm trying to emphasize this point, or even underline something or write something there. Now it looks like it's being scribbled by a 5-year-old. So unless you really have a steady hand, avoid using this. If you want to emphasize certain points, use animation instead. All right. Now, voice projection. Do not be monotonous. It is a good practice even in a face-to-face presentation, and this is really crucial when it comes to virtual presentation because people are just listening to your voice, and if you go on a monotonous way, and especially at lunchtime at 12 o'clock, you're going to put everyone to sleep, okay? The next thing, get audience engagement. Ask questions before the presentation or during the presentation. Pause, get a feel of are they following you? Are they not following you? Are they confused? Get their engagement and have a dialogue as much as possible. Now, even let's say this is an interview session, there's a lot of part that the interview is asking you questions. It is always okay for you to throw some questions back that's related and have that engagement going on. So make it a two-way conversation and always be prepared when things do not go your way. Now, we got to admit we may not know the answer for everything. So if you receive some questions that you do not know the answer, be humble enough to say, sorry, I do not have the answer right now, but I will get back to you. Okay? And time for it. Because it is pretty easy when we start a question or start a dialogue, it is easy to lose track of time. So it's good to always time for it. So here's the summary of creating engagement online. Know your audience, create a good content, deliver it effectively, and get your audience engagement. The next thing that we're going to look at is delivering virtual presentation effectively. Now, the first and foremost, your tools. Invest in good audio and video tools. Your camera. Now, most of us in our laptop, it comes with a camera built in it. So if you have it, good. If you do not have, invest in a good one. Your headset and mic. Now, I would want to emphasize this, and because you have a lot of choices, some of us actually go for a wireless headset, right? Because it's a lot more convenient. Now, if you're having something like that, make sure that it is fully charged, especially before a meeting, right? I've charged this morning, but I made sure that I don't take the chances. I also have my wired headset here. So if you're attending something really important, have your backup ready because you do not want them to fail on you. Test technology beforehand. So if it's going to be a meeting or a Zoom or things like that, test it up front so that you do not dial in at 12 o'clock sharp when you're supposed to present at 12 o'clock and then you find out that, oops, my headset is not working. Oops, my camera is not working. You're just going to make your audience wait for you. Buffer for downtime and upgrades. Have you faced this? You log in into WebEx and then you're just about to start the meeting and WebEx says, we're updating right now. 5 minutes gone. So yes, things like this you cannot avoid, but as much as you can, dial in early, especially when it's an important meeting or an interview, right? Second thing, prepare yourself. Be presentable, just like how you will be in an actual presentation. And this is really important when it comes to an important meeting and interview. Be presentable. Dress up, literally, right? The common thing that we hear is that business on top, party at the bottom. Now, I would want to emphasize here, yes, it's business on top, party at the bottom, but be careful. Don't have too much of party at the bottom because you will never know when you need to stand up. Probably not for that actual virtual meeting, but probably because you got to grab something and then you got to accidentally get up. So if you have too much party at the bottom, you're just going to create a scene that people probably cannot unsay it. Okay, so be careful with that. Have a good posture. Now, if you want to appear confident, make sure that you sit up straight, your back is straight, your shoulders are up well, and that would make you appear to be confident. Don't slouch, all right? Be mindful of what's your posture. Eye contact. Now, it is really difficult for us to, when we were told before, look at the person and speak, and now we are all talking to pinhole. And that is a practice that we all got to start doing. And one of the common things that for us to do is that speak at our own video because we just want to make sure that we kind of look okay or we look nice on that camera, but avoid it and look at the camera instead of your own video. Minimize reading from the slides. And this is also going back to why we shouldn't have too much of words on the slides because that will give us the tendency to read from the screen. Avoid multitasking. And I know this is something that it's so easy to do it because we are all in the virtual environment. And especially when your video is off, it'll be like, okay, let me attend this session right now. And probably I'll scroll my Facebook as well. Or I'll probably check I'll probably do a shopping online for 10 minutes. And then when the speaker suddenly call your name out, Renu, what about this? And you'll go, oh, sorry, can you repeat the question? And that actually shows that you're not paying attention, but you're multitasking, right? I know it's tempting to do so. Avoid multitasking, even if your video is off. And now, here's another thing that I would like to emphasize. Let's say in your meeting where your video is on, but you're on the other screen, on the same screen, you're either taking notes or you're searching for something that's related to that meeting. Now, it may appear as if you're multitasking. So just let the speaker or the host know, saying that, oh, I'm searching for something right now while you're talking to me. Or you can just let them know, I'm taking my notes right now. This would avoid miscommunication or the other party to think that you're not showing interest in that particular meeting. And be alive. And this is also coming back to you should smile when you speak. Now, I make a practice that even when my video is off and I'm speaking, if it's a call, I still smile because that actually shows in your voice. And that also makes the entire conversation much more lively than someone who's just like, again, going on a monotonous way, right? And now, again, more on the preparation. Be on time. Now, that is a simple way of telling the other person if you're late, you're just saying that I do not respect your time. So avoid that. Be on time. And if you can, be early. Now, sometimes this is something that we cannot avoid because we have back to back meetings. When that happens, there's two ways to do it. Either you drop a note to the person, the host of the next meeting saying that, hey, I'll be 5 minutes late. Or the moment you come in, just apologize saying that, sorry, I'm late because I got caught with the other meeting, right? But as much as possible, be on time. Now, if you're presenting, have all your materials ready prior the meeting. Send materials early if it requires any review. Now, if you're going for a meeting and someone else has to read that material and you're going to make a decision, send them early, send a reminder, tell them that we're going to make a decision on ABC. So please read about it, and because that's what we're going to discuss about. Bookmark any required materials. Now, this is also going to be very helpful to save your time because you do not want to be halfway in that meeting. It's like, oh, let me search for this email or let me search for that file, and keep everything ready right before the meeting. If you're an attendee, know the purpose of the meeting. How many times have we attended meeting just because we were called into that meeting, but we don't even know why we are there? Drop an email to the host or make a call, ask them that, why am I attending this? Know the purpose of the meeting so that if there's anything or any material or homework that you got to do in advance, you can do that in advance. That will also help the host or the presenter save his time and everybody else who's in that meeting. And with a quick wrap up. Now, this is one of the things that I will always make sure, and it's very helpful for me, especially when it comes to people of a mixed crowd. As I was saying, people from different countries. I'll do a quick wrap up saying that we decided this. This is the action item by who and who and who by which date. Do we all agree to this? Now, do that so that if anyone has any dispute, they can voice out and they can say that, oh, no, that's not the one, and you can correct it then. Then you can write your meeting minutes thereafter, right? And now, always be ready for video conference. Let me quickly tell you about this story. Sometimes we are going into a call where we think that, oh, it's just going to be, a voice call. I had that one experience earlier on where we have back-to-back trainings for sales folks. Our last training ended a little over midnight, and the next one started at 6:30 in the morning. I specifically asked the host, do we need to turn on our videos in all these sessions? And the host said, no, it's not required. So the call was at 6:30 in the morning. And obviously, because I slept the night before, I just washed my face, brushed my teeth, and sat in that meeting. So the meeting started, and 15 minutes later, they brought an external speaker, which we didn't know. It was a surprise, supposed to be a pleasant surprise, put it that way. He was a TED Talk speaker. The moment he joined the call, he said, folks, turn on your video. And there was an awkward silence. None of us wanted to do it. He said, oh, turn on your video now. Well, let's say it was Halloween came early to a lot of people, and it wasn't too bad because I wasn't the only one. So if you want to avoid such an embarrassing moment, be always ready for video conference. Now, if you're hosting a session, set the expectation prior to the meeting. Log in early because you're the host. You do not want to be like everyone is waiting to call in, but the host isn't there. Share house rule if there's any. Now, this is really important when it comes to meeting where there's like probably 50 or 100 people, and you want all the participants, for example, to mute their audio or turn off their video. Set the house rules. Start on time. Now, unmute all participants if it's required, and know that you have the control to unmute any participant who accidentally turn on their voice, their audio, right? Unchecked participant dial in and dial out. Now, this is a function that WebEx has where when someone dials in or dials out, it kind of have that beep, beep in, beep out. And that could be pretty annoying when someone is speaking and let's say there's 100 or 200 people dialing in and out. So uncheck that features and send out meeting minutes or action item after the meeting so that people would remember what has to be done right after that. Okay, now here are the ethics of virtual presentation. Some of these may sound really simple, but it's really important for us to keep in mind. Number one, I've said this before, but I'm going to emphasize this again. Be on time. It is so easy to take it like, I'm going to log in at 12 sharp, and you're probably going to be late because of some technical issues. So make sure to be on time. Be mindful of your surroundings. Now, today I'm calling from office, right? So it is all like pretty. But at times when we are calling from home, you may want to check where you're sitting and what is your background like, because you do not want to be in a meeting with your video turned on and your family members are walking up and down. Or you have pile of clothes on your bed that is so you could be seen from the other end. Avoid that. Or even you may have some posters in your room that it's okay for you, but if you're engaging with someone from a different culture, that could be something that's offensive. So be mindful and check your surroundings. Mute yourself when you're not talking. This is also to avoid that accidentally some sound to come up while someone else is talking. So if it's not your turn and you're not required to speak, keep it on mute. Do not talk over others. And that is where it actually causes that, too much of noise and people be like, don't even know who's talking or what is actually the conversation is all about. When someone is speaking, let them finish and then you add on. So be sure not to talk over others. Speak up. And I want to emphasize sadly that it is sometimes within our Asian culture that we do not want to speak up when a speaker asks like, do you have any questions or do you agree with me? And or for whatever question that the speaker asks, that a lot of times when you're in meeting, you will notice that people are quiet and the speaker has to say that, well, I assume silence is a sign of everyone is agreeing with me, and then he got to proceed further. So do speak up when someone is asking question. Say your name or ask for name. And this is important when you're dialing in. Let's say you're coming in for let's go back to where we used to be in a face-to-face meeting. When you walk into a meeting room, what do? We will just say, hi, everyone, good morning. Or if the person is quiet as a host, you will just you'll just greet the other person, hi, so and so. But we tend not to do that when it comes to virtual presentation. Have that practice when you're dialing in and there's about like 5 or 6 people, they say, hi, this is Renu here. I was like, if someone is dialing in and then they say, hi, maybe Joshua, hi, Joshua, how are you? Good morning. Things like that. Acknowledge people. Keep it a practice. Turn on your video if it's required. Now, if it's in that meeting, everyone is requested to turn on the meeting, do so. Now, going back to that experience, that not so nice experience that I had early in that morning, where the speaker requested all of us to turn on our video, we could have some of them still remain. They did not turn it on until the end. Now, the option I had that day is to either to be polite to the speaker, to be respectful to the speaker, or look ugly. I choose to look ugly because I want to be respectful to the speaker. So if it's required in that meeting that everyone should turn on, do turn on your video. No food. Again, this is something so easy to do when you're in virtual meetings, especially when your video is not on. You feel like, okay, I can have one or two bites of this. No one is going to know. And then someone calls your name and asks you some question, and you have mouthful of food in your mouth, and now you can't answer, right? And that's going to create an awkward moment. So please, no food, right? And the next one, stay present. As I was saying just now, avoid multitasking. No sneaking out. Now, the same rule that applies on a face-to-face meeting applies on virtual meeting. If you got to leave a meeting earlier on and people are still discussing in that meeting, just put it on the chat box that I got to leave now, right? Be respectful. Minimize distraction. Now, and this is really crucial when we're calling from home. At times, and if it is a really important meeting, at times I know that we can't avoid because we are living and we're sharing space with our family members. So, as much as possible, if it's a really important meeting, if you need 1 hour or 45 minutes all by yourself, do let your family members know or go to a space where you can minimize your distraction. Now, if you really cannot, then handle your distraction calmly. Now, I do share my space with my dog. I'm unable to say to him that, can you please stay quiet while I'm presenting? He's not going to understand, right? Now, when things like that happens, handle your distraction calmly. So if you start to feel like, if you start to panic about the whole thing, start reacting here and there, you're just going to create that discomfort with your audience. So stay calm, control that your situation and go on. And some things it's totally out of your control. For example, as you speak, your roti man probably is passing and you can hear that bell. What can you do about it? You just can't. There's nothing you can do about it. So if it's really noisy and you need to pause for 5 seconds, pause for a while and then continue. But most importantly, stay calm. And last but not least, on the ethics, do not take your phone or even your wireless headset to the bathroom. Now, again, we are so tempted to do that. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, it's okay. I'm all muted. I'm just going to continue listening while I'll go. We have incidences where it has somehow accidentally has turned on. And as I was saying earlier, there's some things when you see it or you hear it, you cannot unsee it. And you do not want to be the person who actually being in that situation, right? And no matter how critical it is, do not take your phone or do not wear your headset and go to the bathroom or even cook while you're in the kitchen and wearing your headset in a meeting. Because if it and we I have personally experienced that someone went to the kitchen and started cooking thinking that she's on mute. So we all heard her entire cooking session while in the meeting. So avoid that. And to wrap up, so what is the main difference, as we spoke just now, between a face-to-face meeting and virtual presentation? Human touch. And that's the missing piece. Understanding that is where we want to create our engagement with our audience. First thing is by knowing your audience. Remember, everyone everyone has this. What is in it for me? So answer that for your audience. Create a high quality content by keeping it simple, interesting, and pay attention to the details. And when they are delivering it, be mindful of your audience and avoid the commonly made mistakes. And create your audience engagement. Ask them questions, have dialogue with them, but time for it as well. And now to elevate your presentation, invest in good audio and video tools. Prepare, prepare, and prepare. Prepare yourself. If you're attendee, know your role when you're attending that meeting. And if you're a host, make sure you do all your preparation and prepare your attendees as well, right? And finally, remember the etiquettes, all right? So these are the tips, and with some practice, I believe that you too can create, and deliver an effective presentation. With that, I open the floor to any questions that you may have. Let me open up. All right. Okay,
Wow,
so
Renu, that's actually really, really good. I think even myself, I've gotten quite a bit of tips out of that. And I must say I am also guilty of some of the things, especially multitasking.
it's so easy to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think one of the key takeaway that I've gotten from this presentation is that everyone should actually respect meetings as it is, regardless whether it's physical or a virtual one. So, like you said, don't do whatever things that you wouldn't do in a physical meeting,
Yes,
right?
that's the rule.
So before we actually get to the questions, just now in the chat, everybody was just going through it, and I picked out something that is really interesting, and people are saying, like, at the regarding the multitasking. So some of them are saying there's no way. Sometimes you can't avoid multitasking, because they have urgent tasks, or it's just their job roles that they have many things concurrently happening. So how do you think one can actually address these kind of issues?
Now, again, the question is, will we do this in a face-to-face meeting, right? Because um, there's only a certain percentage of people when they multitask, they can do both with the same amount of attention. Very small percentage of people, and a big number of us can't. So if you're doing two things simultaneously, honestly, you're only being your focus on one of it. So it's either the meeting that you're attending is the one that you're letting go, or the email that you're doing, or something that you're reading that you're not doing full-heartedly. So you just have to admit that we are all not good at multitasking. And if it's an important one that you got to quickly do it, then you may want to tell the person in over there that you got to quickly do this and come back. I have done that because in a one-to-one meeting and something that's related to came in. So I've told my counterpart, hang on for 30 seconds. I'll quickly do this and I'll come back to you. So at least while she's waiting, she can do something else rather than I waste her time, right?
Yeah, great. I hope some of you who has troubles with that, that you have to multitask, I hope that has actually given you some insight. So now on to the question and answer. So again, if you have questions, if you're curious about anything, and if you would like to actually take your presentation to the next level, ask away in the Q&A section. So we have a few right now, and we're going to try to address as many as possible. And of course, before we get there, the session is actually just supposed to be an hour, and we're quickly coming up to that time. But so if we have a lot of questions, I can actually allocate a few more minutes to try and answer it. So don't worry about the timing. If you can stay on, please do stay on until until we end. If not, you could also leave at 1 o'clock. I know it's lunchtime, so I'm just going to get right into the questions. So we have one from Boyd asking how to decide whether or not to send the presentation file to an attendee to the attendees.
Okay. Now, there's two things that you may want to consider when you think that you should or shouldn't be sharing. For example, like for us within the corporate, when we usually go back to our, for example, certain presentation that if we are going on behalf of HR, we will always ask HR that can we do it. If it's a no, then it's easy to decide. And another one that if you want to share the files to your attendees, know whether are they confidential or not. If it's not confidential, or sometimes in a whole deck of slides, right? Some of them are confidential. In the presentation that I've done in the past, what we will do is that some confidential information, though we have actually flashed to the audience, when we are sharing it, we will remove it. And we will share something that it is okay for people to keep. So there are some situations where you can send a partial part of it, but not the whole thing, right?
Right, great. I think one of these questions from Nozalina is actually really interesting. I think it relates back to your experience. If I'm presenting or hosting, will it be okay if I ask the audience to turn on their video?
Oh, I think it's okay, but I would say please tell them earlier on because I mean, you do not want to put them in a situation that where I was in. It was really bad. So, I mean, for me, I felt really bad, right? It was awkward. But I would say that if you want to do so, let them know upfront that, everyone is encouraged to turn on their video and do that. Now, here's another thing I would like to share. Now, if you're a manager, or you're a project manager, for example, and you have people from different places, always encourage to have a session with all your videos, your cameras turned on, so that you can see each other. That will kind of bring your connection, that bond, closer. I've been doing this ever since the pandemic started with my team in these countries, and I find that it's really amazing because we actually got closer, even though we have not met almost for a year.
That's true. That's true. I do agree with that as well. Even not meeting and you see people over the video, it's also, it's a compromise, I would say, right? But at
Yes.
least you get to see the person.
Yes, and you will
Um,
know that at which, and I mean, what kind of environment they're working in.
yeah,
Right.
that's true. So Hua Ing Kiet, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly, has agreed that on the speaking up problem during virtual meeting is an Asian culture. But as a presenter, may I know how can we solve this problem when attendees are shy to speak at that very moment?
Okay, I have two tips over here. Number one, for Asians, somehow they kind of like to use the chat box more than voice, rather than asking directly. That seems to be the way. So if you're okay to accept those questions, or you may want to start off saying that, if you have any questions, you can either put it on the chat box or you can unmute yourself and speak. So that's one way of doing. Now, another way of doing, which is also a trick, is that to plant their audience. Now, this is not wrong, but it's something very common that works for Asians because they just do not want to be the first person asking the question. So give one or two questions to someone you know to start off or to get the ball rolling. And once you will notice that after one or two questions is up, then you easily can get the third and fourth question up already. And that seems to be working all the time.
That's true. That's true. Actually, the fact of Asians are more comfortable asking questions on the chat is actually really I think that's quite true because when I give talks in live sessions physically, I do get a lot lesser questions generally than doing it in a webinar format. So in webinars, everybody can just type out all the questions. So
Yes.
I really do think utilizing different forms of um, panels to encourage asking would really help. So I would like to also share something that we practice in Job Street. So whenever we have town halls, we use something called Slido. So you can search it up, you can Google it. It's called Slido. And that actually allows people to go in and actually leave questions anonymously. So that actually sort of gives you that level of comfort to actually ask away, ask what is your burning question that you really want to know, but you're probably too shy to ask. Right. So moving on to the next question by an anonymous attendee. Can asking questions during presentation be useful for all participants? I'm not sure what you are really getting to. Maybe you want
Um,
to explain a bit, or maybe Renu, if you understand the
Yeah,
question.
I'm guessing. Okay, I'm just guessing. I think the question
Mm,
is about that. Um, when you're asking questions, can you ask questions to all level of people,
mm,
including those who are at director level? To me, is why not? Especially when the decision maker is going to be someone at that level, because only when you ask questions. I mean, but of course, your question has to be something that appropriate or suitable to someone at that level. Because if he's the decision maker, only when you have that engagement, you're going to know that his level of interest in whatever that you're presenting. Right. Yes, of course, again, it's a very Asian thing that we always look at that level kind of a thing. But if they are the decision maker, it's really crucial for us to know what is their opinion. Then, if they are having some doubts, it's your chance to quickly clear that. Right.
yep, and it will also probably make you look good as well.
Yes.
Asking questions to a higher level.
Yes.
So I'm going to group these questions together. I think there are a few asking what sort of equipment you would recommend, like what mic are you actually using
Okay, I don't
today.
intend to talk about brand. I'm not getting anything here. But but anyway, this is Jabra. Both my headsets are Jabra. This is a wireless headset, and this is with wired headset. I'm using Jabra for both, and they seems to be working fine. And that's also because I wear it almost like 6 hours or 7 hours, sometimes more than that in a day. So I kind of switch between these two, so that my ears could actually hold it that long. Yeah, and they seems to be of a very good quality because I've been doing a lot of presentation, inclusive of recording, and the voice projection seems to be really good.
Yeah, someone also actually mentioned Jabra earlier in the chat. So
Yes, yes.
yeah, so if you really want to invest, probably Jabra is a really good brand for for converting your voice nicely on digitally, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of voice, Muhammad Siham is actually asking, how do you make your voice not so monotonous? And I think grouping this together, also together, and how to make a boring topic interesting. I think that sort of comes hand in hand as well.
Okay, I'll go into voice first because someone asked me this on a face-to-face session. So for some people, I've met this person who attended the session earlier on, and he really has this voice, which is he has that monotonous voice, right? That way, flat. Now, for someone like that, if you're someone like that, that requires practice. And for many of us who are actually speaking or presenting, a lot of this is actually practice. And if you particularly have that monotonous voice, do quite a bit of a practice. And it is not that difficult. What you want to remember is that if you're emphasizing something, emphasize it, right? Slow down, emphasize that word. The rest, you can go that way, right? So again, knowing your message in every slides, what are the things that you want to emphasize? Emphasize that and move on. Emphasize that and move on. Do a bit of practice. And as you do that, and if you want to take one step further, you can always record your own voice and listen to it. And you will see yourself getting better. And I'm not saying this that's going to be easy. I'm not saying that, oh, that's just a tips. I have done that. And it took me quite a while, but only with practice you actually get better. Right now, coming to the question of how do you make boring topic presentation, as this comes usually for technical presentation. Now, keep your slides less wordy. That itself will make it interesting. You can always replace it with either your diagram or or certain graphics that actually explains the whole thing. The rest of it, you explain. So you are going to keep your slides interesting. So then people will be like, what is next? What is next? The rest is all you're explaining it. But a lot of time, that's a common mistake that we do because it's technical and you tend to throw everything in your slides. So avoid that, keep it less wordy, put in more graphics or your diagrams, and that itself will be the first step to make it interesting.
Right, great. Next question, any tips on screen share etiquette? So it's easy to create flaws during such sessions.
Screen share. All right. Okay. So first thing that you want to do is, it is always great if you have a dual screen. Today I was unable to because dual screen will be really helpful if you're doing screen sharing because whatever that you're not going to share, put it aside. Right. That's number one. And then whatever you want to share, only open up in your main screen. And it's always again coming. I saw in the chat group everyone say I've got to multitask because I'm engineer. Hello, I'm in sales. I also want to do that same thing. Right. So again, if you have opened up something, say for example, online shopping, do not open it together with whatever you want to share, right? Put it all in your next screen and turn it on only whatever you want to share here and just flash it. So one of the things that I always do is that if I'm doing something that's going to present, I will close everything else unless the reference documents and whatever I need. Reference one side and here is the other one and try to run it once. And then you're going to know how it's going to work, and that would actually help you.
Right. So just now the question was on how do you not make your voice monotonous. This question here is asking about how do you not make your voice sound nervous.
Don't be nervous. I'm going to make it easy. Right. Again, that's practice. So here's the thing. There's a good thing about virtual presentation. There's nobody else is actually looking at you directly. So, we all get nervous when people are staring at you. Now, no one is actually staring at me except for the fact that is in my head that there's a couple of hundred people watching me. So put that aside. Now, a lot of times nervousness is because of a couple of things. Number one is we think sometimes that we are not good enough in certain things that we are presenting. Now, know the fact that, going back to the very beginning where I said that introduce yourself, create credential, that also in a way to remind yourself, why are you presenting? Because you have certain expertise that you want to share. That should take away some level of nervousness. And remember the second thing, everyone who is going to share will feel just like you, feel nervous. So you're not the only one. So put that aside. And the third thing is most people who's attending always wants the best in you. So once you have these three things in mind, you're just going to minimize that nervousness. And again, this is virtual, less nervous compared to the actual ones when you do face to face.
Yep. The next question is on how do you actually get the attention of the attendees, especially if, like the video is off.
All right, so that is where asking questions comes in, right? And if you know, for example, in the meeting that these are people that you know, then you throw some questions. And when there's no one answering, just pick a person and ask them that, what do they think about it? In a way, when you start doing that, the rest of them will know that they got to pay attention because their names might be called as well. Right. And another thing that I always do is I will do a quick round around the table and I get everyone to say something about it. Or do you have any question? And because sometimes, again, coming back to Asian culture, people don't say it until like, you ask them that, do you have any opinion about that? And then they will speak up. At times, calling some people's name will actually help them to speak up.
Right. The next question here, actually, I think it answers for even if you are, if you're working or even if you're going for an interview. So this person is asking, sometimes we receive challenging questions from the audience, or in another case, probably the interviewer, and you're not able to answer it completely. So what's your advice to give?
Now, I have been in that situation, right? So if you do not know, um, just be honest about it and say that that's not something that you know about, and or that's not your areas of expertise. It's always fine to be honest than saying something which is completely not related.
Yep, that's true. Honesty is the best policy in this case. Don't try to sort of wing it or try to
Yes.
lie your way through, especially if it's for interviews, because that will always end up not favorable towards
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Correct.
The other interesting question is camera angle. So is camera angle so important? As I noticed, sometimes speaker is actually showing off their nostril.
Yes. So here's the thing, and I found out that for some laptop, for a strange reason, that the camera is actually at the bottom.
Yeah.
So if you have something like that, lift up your laptop. All you just need is your old dictionaries or old books. Put it at the bottom and lift it up and make sure it's at the eye length. Now, as I speak about camera position, right, there's another thing that I would want to emphasize, the room lighting. Now, the room that I'm sitting right now, it's fully lighted. But if you're somewhere where the light is coming from one side of the room, and again, that's going to create that horror movie effect. So make sure that the light is, you can actually get something like this. I brought to show it to y'all. Some people call it selfie lights, but it's actually not. You can get it online. I got it for like 15 ringgit. So you can actually, I'm not sure, let me turn it on. Right, okay. So when you turn it on, you can actually put it right, oh, this is blinking. So you can actually put it right at the screen so that it is actually lighting, the lights is actually right in front of you. And that will give you a better look when it comes to lighting. So if your room lighting is not good, get something like this. It's really cheap and it can really help you with the lighting.
I probably need to get myself one of that as well.
Yes, yeah.
I am guilty of that sometimes. The lighting of my area is not that good.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think that really helps. So yeah, for all of you who have that difficulty, do look into that. I think it's rather cheap as well. It's not a
Yeah,
expensive
this one was
microphone.
like 15 ringgit. This is really
Yeah.
cheap. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, I'm not sure if the previous question actually answers this, but let's say, what if the audience's responses are actually too cool? So maybe they're not very responsive towards your questions. So what would you do then?
Okay, so I always say this. There's two things in every situation. Something that you can control, something that you cannot control, right? Pandemic, something that we cannot control. So it's just like that. When you're presenting and when you're asking question, just like at the very beginning when I asked for the question that I raised, I also took the chances that no one would want to respond to it, right? So when that happens, there's nothing personal about it. What you got to do is that you try to encourage people to answer. If really for some reason zero respond, and then you give the answer yourself and move on to it, right? We just cannot hang on to one of it and just move forward, because that's the part that you cannot control. And don't let your spirit down just because people do not respond to you, because it probably because of some reason that is out of your control, right?
True. Um, so Patrick here is asking a very, very good question. So background, or rather virtual background. So as you can
Ah,
see, I have one. Renu, you're not using one. So
yes.
what are some of the best background? And he's also asking font color combinations. I'm going to add in one more to his question as well. Virtual backgrounds is a yes or a no. What are your thoughts?
Well, virtual background to me is always the second or almost to the final last option. And here's the reason why. Because when sometimes you cannot avoid, like we were saying, right? We all don't have white background at home. So when we don't have that, and sometimes what we do is we tend to go for virtual background. Now, one thing with virtual background is, if you notice, especially if you're wearing a headset, which is rather bulky at the sides and all that, and you're on a virtual background, as you move, it gets to truncate one area or the other. And also, as you're moving with your hand gestures and all that, it tends to chop off one part and the other, right? It gives you the, yes, you see, it gets distorted a bit. So
Yeah.
right, because of that, I'm not a big fan of virtual background. But sometimes we got to use it because of, in that meeting it's required, or because you are in a place where it is really quite disturbing and you got to put it. So unless it's really, really you have to me, virtual background is my last option, I would say.
So if you were to do virtual backgrounds, which is better, static ones like this, or sometimes you get some movement in the background, which is better in your opinion?
Now that goes back to who you want the audience to pay attention to, your background or yourself. If it's going to be yourself, then don't have something that is taking too much of attention. And that is also coming back to, if you're an attending interview, try not to wear something so big that in the end of the interview, people remember, oh, I remember that candidate with that big earring, but not remember what she said, right? So yeah, who you want the audience to pay attention to. If it's yourself, make sure it's to what you're saying.
Yep, I think, yeah, there you go, guys. Two in one tips. So virtual background and also interview tips. So try not to wear something that's outshining yourself,
Yourself.
and people will remember you for the wrong reasons, right?
Yes.
We're gonna take a few more. Just being mindful of time, right? So, this question is specifically, um, how do you do, or rather, what is the prep work that you do, that you find helpful to know your audience, to know who you're speaking to?
Okay. So again, it depends. Like today, I think I had a conversation with Calvin a lot more earlier, and I asked about is it going to be students or the kind of background of the audience attending this. And if you notice, a lot of examples that I gave is about interviews and at workplace. And I also gave the same sharing within Keysight, and they were totally the examples were about our job, right? How we do things here. So it's always I'll take a bit of a time to do that homework. Now, coming to actual work, when I'm going to present to my customers, I'll always take a bit of a time to understand who are my customers. At times, I'll search for their names either on website to understand what's their position, or make a few calls to understand who they are. That will really make a lot of difference, because yes, it's going to take a bit of a time, but you want to make it impactful. Always know your audience. Now, some of you may have this question: what if it's a mixed group of people? So how do I speak now? Because I have someone at the director level, engineer level, and I also have engineering manager. Now, again, the question comes to, who is the decision maker? At times, it could be the engineering manager, even though the director is sitting there. Now, roughly knowing that also helps you. So when you have a mixed group like this, give an answer that covers these three groups, but pay a little bit more attention to the person or the group who's going to make the decision, right? So that's how you do it. It's going to take a bit of a time, but doing your homework is a must.
Great. Next question. Is it rude to record the meeting without asking the host permission? I think this is pretty
Kind of,
straightforward.
yes. Because
Yeah.
we want to know whether they're comfortable with that or not. So it's always right before you record, let them know that you're about to start the recording, right?
Yeah.
So that if anyone has any concern, they will raise at that time.
Yeah. Common courtesy, right?
Yes.
Can you share some tips on how to control participants when everyone wants to speak up at the same time? Well, I think this is a good problem.
Yeah.
I don't think we get that a lot, but yeah. So if that happens, how do you actually control them?
So at that time, what we can do is that you can, let's say four people, four of them are talking at the same time. You just say that, okay, guys, one person, probably we will start with one person and then call the person's name out. But then do remember the other people, the other people who like, you kind of like, put them on hold. Let the first person speak. Once done, then make sure you call the rest. And do remember not to miss out anything because, that would be perceived as I'm not important. Right. So take the control. So that is where when you're hosting or you are presenting, we got to take control when we open up for question or when we open up for dialogue. It can go a little bit out of control. So as someone who's host, again, this is not about I'm Asian, I want to be polite, so I'm going to keep quiet. No, it's about you taking the lead. Right. So take the lead and tell and make sure that you say that, okay, this person, you may want to go first, and then person B, do you have something to add on? So take control.
Yep. So, okay. Thank you so much, Renu. I think that's all the time we have for Q&A. So we will try to respond to you as well. We have your emails, and if you have left your questions not anonymously, we can see what are your emails. We can get in touch with you. But a lot of you are also asking how can you get this recording? This as you saw, this session is recorded. And we will be posting it up on our social media channel on JobStreet's Facebook and also YouTube. So you can find it there later on. And yes, so don't forget, Keysight is also hiring. So if you are looking for a job or looking out for further opportunities, do check them out. Just go on to JobStreet and search for Keysight, and you can see all the jobs that are available there. Right. I would like to once again thank Renu for this session. After this, I thank you everyone as well for joining. Thank you for your time. After this, we will have a survey. Once you close this webinar, we have a survey that will be going out. Do feel free to leave your feedback, and also do let us know what are some of the other topics that you would like to hear. And we may just get Renu back and do another session, if you're really interested in a follow-up on this session. Right. Thank you again. Once again, my name is Kelvin, and Renu was your speaker today. Thank you, Keysight, for taking this time to share all these tips with our candidates right here today. Okay, thank you, everyone, and have a good week ahead. And
Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
bye-bye.
Bye.